Hey everyone, I'm your host Mike Porter, and tonight on Arcane Station we're going to talk about witches. While I didn't talk about this in the last episode, I lived in a place called Paradise, Texas, where, according to the Dogman Triangle documentary, was where one of the Dogman sightings took place. Now I've since moved from Paradise to a town in Virginia Beach in an area called Pungo. And while we were driving around, I saw an interesting statue and I had to investigate what this sculpture was all about. I was surprised to learn of a witch story connected to the statue. So obviously, as a game developer and an avid gamer, I'm a completionist. I have to find 100% of the secrets. So you're invited to come explore those nooks and crannies of this rabbit hole with me. And we aren't stopping with just Pungo. We're going to go deeper. When people think of American witches, they almost always think of Salem, Puritans, gallows, and absurd clothing. Accusations of witchcraft was uncommon in Virginia. Rather than the witch panic of Massachusetts, Virginia witchcraft trials were typically civil matters with different outcomes, but the legend is still alive in Virginia Beach. One July morning in 1706, a woman was taken by boat into the Lynnhaven River, bound and tossed overboard to see if she would sink or float. That moment, and the woman at the center of it, became part of Virginia's tidewater folklore forever. Facing persecution, the logical choice was to move away from civilization and travel into the mountains of Appalachia. Stories of witches took root in the isolated hollers and backwoods, and in those mountains the witches found more acceptance, but they were still feared. Some stories of witches in inhuman forms circulated, telling of encounters with women who didn't seem quite human at all. So let's start our journey with Grace Sherwood, the so-called Pungo witch, and follow the old roads and into the highlands to meet the granny witches. We will discuss the cunning folk, dip into the supernatural with the white-dressed, bird-footed figures who walk between the worlds, and end up with what witches are up to today. I hope you enjoy this episode, Witches in the Woods. In early 1700s in Princess Anne County, today part of Virginia Beach, it was farmland surrounded by tidal rivers and creeks. And there was a woman named Grace Sherwood who worked her land. She knew the herbs and plants of the woods and marshes and served as a midwife. Usually this wouldn't have been problematic in the far less prone to panic state of Virginia. However, Grace was a problem. She wore trousers while tending her fields, refused to remarry after being widowed, and became a wealthy landowner due to her husband's untimely death. More concerning, she was outspoken and challenging, having stood up for herself in court when neighbors slandered her. In a Puritan-influenced society, that was enough to mark her as different, and back then, different was dangerous. The accusations built over the years, claims that she had ruined crops, killed livestock, and slipped into people's homes by turning herself into a black cat. Grace fought back against these accusations with lawsuits, but in 1706 the accusations escalated to formal witchcraft charges. The court heard testimony but couldn't decide, so instead of dismissing the case, and they ordered something rare for Virginia, a trial by ducking. The term ducking was used when witches were thrown or lowered into a body of water to see if they would sink and possibly drown to be proven innocent, or if they floated, which would prove that they were witches. So, on July 10th, 1706, Grace was bound crosswise, her right thumb to her left big toe, her left thumb to her right big toe, and then taken into the Lynnhaven River. The idea was that the water, being pure, would reject the witch and make her float. They tossed her in, and, unfortunately, she floated. That was enough for the crowd to call her guilty. They didn't hang or burn her at the stake, but she did spend time in jail, between 7 to 9 years in fact. She eventually returned to her farm in Pungo and lived out her days on her property, finally passing away in her 80s. That's a far better ending than most accused witches ever got in Salem. Most were hanged, some were burned at the stake, others were strangled then burned, or they were crushed under heavy stones being placed on top of them one by one while shackled to the ground. Virginia usually only required imprisonment as punishment. Still, losing your freedom is a horrible thing to have happen to anyone. This ducking location now has a name, The place where she was ducked is still called Witchduck Point, and Witchduck Road runs right through Virginia Beach. While Grace wasn't executed, some tell a tale of a ghostly figure at the edge of the marshes, or a black cat peering out at people from the edge of the woods. People believe that this may be the spirit of Grace, watching forever without rest. In the 18th century, settlers began moving west, particularly the Scots-Irish and their cunning folk practices. Also the German and the Dutch. Overcrowding in the colonies and their quest for religious freedom pushed them into those ancient mountains, the Appalachians, and there they found fertile fields. But with them came their own European customs and their own brands of witchcraft. Those of Germanic descent practiced braucherie, which is a system of Christian folk practice that originated with German-speaking immigrants who settled in colonial Pennsylvania in the 17th and 18th centuries. Braucherie involves rituals and beliefs that are used for healing humans, livestock, and crops, as well as for spiritual and physical protection. Braucherie was a unique mixture of German folk belief, grimoires, and Christian texts. People started calling this practice powwowing. This term was used due to the perceived similarities between braucherie practice and those of the indigenous tribes of the region. The term powwow is believed to be borrowed from the Narragansett and Massachusetts languages, and it meant indigenous priest, shaman, or healer. Powwowing is still in practice to this day, but among the neo-pagan and neo-heathen communities, some elements of braucherie are being reinterpreted within the context of pre-Christian Germanic religions and moving away from the traditional Christian worldview that forms its foundation. So in the mountains far from colonial courts, witchcraft took on a different shape. Life was isolated and hard. Without a formal structure, self-reliance was required to thrive. This is where the granny witches began, where they were both valued and feared. A granny witch might be your neighbor, your healer, your midwife. She knew which roots to boil for a fever and which charm to hang over a newborn's cradle. She might keep a Bible open on the table while mixing herbs. Appalachian magic was a blend of traditions. The Scots-Irish cunning folk magical practices used charms, spells, herbal remedies, and protective signs or sigils. The German and Dutch practiced braucherie, which was a mixture of Christian prayers mixed with herbal remedies, gestures, and rituals. The blending of these two practices would no doubt be caused by oral traditions of what worked and what didn't, which gesture had the best result, and what rituals kept away haints, the boogers, and the whistlers. Granny witches were often the primary healthcare providers in their communities, offering remedies for broken bones, fevers, and childbirth. They utilized knowledge of local plants and herbs for healing, like catnip tea for hives or calamus root for colic. They sometimes combined herbal remedies with spiritual practices like reciting the Bible verse or protective charms during childbirth. In the past, access to formal medical care was limited in rural areas, making granny witches crucial for the well-being of their communities. Their practices represent a unique blend of traditional knowledge and spiritual beliefs passed down through generations. Some granny witches were known for talking away ailments, like warts, using specific words and rituals while treating the affected area. Even my father told me of a granny witch that placed a rag steeped in turpentine on his wart and then spoke it away. Another very similar remedy that I've used is placing chewed tobacco on a wasp sting, which would make the pain go away almost instantly. The practice of granny witchcraft is becoming less common as modern medicine becomes more accessible. But I think that a more simple time and a more traditional means of healing is something that we need to look at again. People who spend an extended amount of time with natives in Africa and South America tell of resolving ailments with just the plants around them. The line between healer and witch was razor thin, though, and often depend on whether you were on the witch's good side. Not all witches had your best interest in mind. Some were evil and practiced black magic, hexing people they believed had done them wrong. The signs of evil witchcraft in the mountains were as real to the people who lived there as the sunrise. If you were on the bad side, there would be a sign, which were small but significant and instilled concern. Things like, the butter won't churn no matter how long you worked it. cows giving bloody milk, and a rifle that suddenly started shooting crooked were evidence that you had crossed a witch. The solutions to these problems were part of ritual practices as well. Firing a silver bullet at the witch in her animal form, or burying a witch bottle near the hearth, and burning the heart of a bewitched animal could make the witch lift her curse. And these weren't just tall tales. Evidence of this showed up in the 18th and 19th century newspapers, the oral histories of the bookwomen, which was kind of like a bookmobile of the time period, and even early county court records. As stated previously, mountain magic often ran hand in hand with Christianity. The same woman who made you a protective charm might tell you to recite Psalm 91 every morning. And the Bible has been interwoven with folk magic traditions, with some practitioners using scripture as a source of power and healing. This blend of religious texts and traditional practices is particularly evident in granny magic, and many practitioners consider themselves devout Christians whose healing gifts come from God. The granny witches see some of the scripture as actual spell work used for healing or even stopping bleeding, like the blood verse from Ezekiel 16:6. However, there are those who twist the scripture for curses and hexes. Their dark magic distorts the Bible, and the verses are often recited backwards to pervert the scripture. Through those practices are those people transformed in the process of working their evil magic. In some Appalachian witch tales, what people saw or claimed to see doesn't sound entirely human. So let's get into the high strangeness of witch encounters, the one that feel like they overlap with cryptid sightings, ghost stories, or even alien contact. In parts of West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, people tell of seeing a woman in a white dress on lonely roads or at the edge of fields at night. From a distance they look human, but when they step closer or get a better look, the woman in white has legs that end in scaled bird feet. Interestingly, there have been accounts of these women in white near Bigfoot encounters. Could these evil witches be the cause of these strange sightings, and is Bigfoot a protector? There are countless women in white stories about spirits who are searching for lost loves or revenge, or they just haven't figured out that they're already dead. While the women in white in the Bigfoot context isn't recounted as a ghost, I wonder if that's what they are, a spiritual being, a lost soul that is stuck here. People talk about them gliding without moving their legs at all. Sometimes they vanish the moment you look away. These figures are often connected to witches traveling in spirit form or death omens. See one and somebody in the community will die. Another widely told story in the mountains is of waking in the night, unable to move, with an old woman or night hag sitting on your chest. Her hands are cold, her breath smells of damp earth. In some accounts, her feet are clawed like a rooster's. In Scandinavian folklore, sleep paralysis is caused by a mare, a supernatural creature related to the incubi and succubi. The mare is a damn woman who is cursed, and her body is carried away mysteriously during sleep and without her noticing. I'm assuming this is astral projection that is taking place. In this state, she visits villagers to sit on their rib cages while they are asleep, causing them to experience nightmares. This folklore is shared throughout the world, the U.S. and up into Canada. The victim of a night hag usually wakes with a feeling of terror, has difficulty breathing because of a perceived heavy invisible weight on his or her chest, and is unable to move. They experience sleep paralysis. This nightmare experience is described as being hag-ridden. To break her hold, you have to grab a Bible or a knife without looking her in the eye. This blends classic sleep paralysis with the belief that witches could leave their bodies at night to torment enemies. Transformation from a woman to a creature, either a night hag or bird-footed being, is not the only tales of shape-shifting. In much of the recorded Appalachian witch lore, shape-shifting isn't symbolic. People believe that certain witches could, through spell work, ointments, or spoken charms, take on the form of an animal. This wasn't a hallucination or a dream, it was a tangible, flesh-and-blood transformation, and the choice form usually matched the need. If they transformed into a bird, it was to travel great distances unseen, to spy or to steal crops without being recognized. If they were a wolf or a dog, it was to hunt, terrify, or attack without revealing the witch's human identity. A rabbit or a cat was used to slip into homes and barns through tiny spaces, to sabotage butter churns or milk cows dry. If they took a form of an owl, it was to move silently at night. watching without being watched. If it were possible to have that type of power, the temptation, I would imagine, is easy to understand. To fly like a crow over the mountains, to run like a wolf under the moon, to see the land from above, to stalk game with inhuman speed. But the old stories also warn that while transformed, witches were vulnerable to physical harm and susceptible to losing themselves, remaining in beast form. While transformed, if the hunter shot the witch in animal form, the injury would also appear on the witch's human body when she returned. This is a recurring theme in Appalachian folklore, sometimes called the wounded witch motif. One well-known recounting in a 1930s interview from West Virginia, a farmer claims he shot at a massive blackbird that was stealing his corn. He hit it with buckshot, but when he went to retrieve the body, it was gone. The next morning, his neighbor woman, long suspected of witchcraft, was in bed with a fresh buckshot wound on her leg. Another account from the Blue Ridge tells of a man whose prize hog was being harassed by a large black dog. He fired at it with a silver bullet. The dog yelped and ran away. Later that day, a woman from a nearby cabin was found limping, bleeding from a wound in almost the exact same spot that he had shot at the dog. So is it possible for someone to transform themselves into a creature? Folklorists suggest several methods for achieving this shift. Animal skin or pelts. Wearing one during a ritual, sometimes anointed with an oil made from specific herbs like belladonna, henbane, or aconite, all plants known for their toxic hallucinogenic properties. Incantations. Spoken charms, often at night, sometimes backwards, calling on the spirits or elements to change the form. Salves. Fat mixed with herbs, rubbed on the body. This appears in both European and Appalachian traditions and may have been rooted in actual drug effects and belief in magical transference. In these traditions, the transformation wasn't seen as metaphorical but mechanical, a process with steps, materials, and a result you could touch. I spoke of two risks. One was bodily damage and losing yourself, your identity, becoming a creature. The final risk is losing your soul. Staying in animal form for too long, it's said that the person who has done this is no longer themselves and acts completely differently than they did previously. Perhaps their bodies become inhabited by another soul. So why risk it? For a witch, living in isolation, surrounded by watchful neighbors, the ability to transform was the ultimate edge. It allowed movement unseen, the gathering of information, and the execution of curses or blessings without leaving evidence. It also offered something deeper, the thrill of inhabiting another body, of moving through the world with a predator's senses. For those who believed in the craft, that temptation would be hard to resist. And perhaps that's why these stories endure. They're not just about the fear of the witches, they're about envy too. When they lose themselves, are they to blame for missing travelers? Are they luring people into a different realm? There are tales of travelers encountering a woman, sometimes young and pretty, sometimes old and weathered, who asks for a ride or walks alongside you for a while. She may carry a bundle of herbs or wear a white bonnet or speak in a strange cadence. Suddenly she vanishes as if she was never really there. I wonder how many times this ended poorly and the person who was talking to this woman never returned. There are a huge amount of stories of people going missing in the mountains of Appalachia, and some of those disappearances happen around areas of high strangeness. One story tells of a traveler who offered to walk a woman home. She led him up the stone steps of a collapsed cabin. He reached the third step, and then the world went silent. The next thing he knew, he was standing alone in the forest at dawn, miles away from the ruins. These ruined stairs appear in multiple Appalachian accounts. Sometimes they were the last remnant of a burned or abandoned house where the whole family wasted away. Sometimes they marked a witch crossing, a place where, according to tradition, the living and the dead, or the human and the other world, could meet. People warn against climbing the stairs at night, especially in moonlight. In some tellings, you wouldn't come back the same. In others, you wouldn't come back at all. Folklorists call this a liminal structure, a physical feature that sits between two states of being. In the old belief, it was a kind of spirit road marker, not to be disturbed or used without knowing the proper rites. Now fast forward today, There is this old ruined stairway motif that seems to have evolved online into the now famous mystery stairs in the woods stories. Stories of these stairs are widely shared on Reddit, creepypasta, and Missing 411 forums. These accounts describe pristine staircases in the middle of remote forests or national parks, far from any sign of human settlement. Witnesses report feelings of dread, a compelling urge to climb the stairs, or the distinct sense of being watched. Some stories claim that people vanish after interacting with the stairs, echoing the older witch crossing disappearances. While most modern staircase tales are likely fictional or exaggerated, the parallels are striking. A solitary structure in a wild place, a sudden unnatural silence, a boundary you cross at your own risk. It's not hard to see how old warnings about ruined stairs tied to witches could morph, in the internet age, into a cleaner, creepier version, the structure out of place, untouched by time, leading somewhere you're not meant to go. From the salty marshes of Witchduck Point to the shattered hollers of the Appalachian Mountains, the bones of these stories are the same, no matter how much time passes or how many miles lies between them. When the cow stops giving milk, when the baby takes ill without warning, when the hunting rifle suddenly shoots wide, somebody somewhere must have caused it. In the Tidewater, the name might have been spoken aloud in the courtroom. In the mountains, it was whispered in the kitchen with the curtains drawn. The target was always the one who didn't quite fit and who lived at the edge of things. Women with knowledge, herbal, spiritual, or otherwise, were seen as dangerous. Grace Sherwood's skill with herbs and her refusal to bend to social expectations made her a target in coastal Virginia. In the mountains, the granny women could bring down a fever or stop a bleeding wound that might be honored one day and feared the next. Knowledge was power, and power, in the wrong hands or simply in the wrong person, was suspect. Some stories stay rooted in the human world, a healer accused of ill will, a neighbor blamed for a bad harvest. Others drift into the liminal, women in white dresses with the feet of birds, luminous shapes singing backward hymns in the woods, ruined stairways that draw you upward into silence. These aren't courtroom tales, they're the kind you hear when the fire burns low, told by someone who swears they're not making it up, though their eyes won't quite meet with yours while they say it. It's strange how people feared those cunning women, those midwives and healers. For a long while, witchcraft hid in the shadows, but today there are open practitioners, and they don't dwell in the hut in the woods, and could be family. If the old witch stories about Virginia and Appalachia were about survival, about knowing which herb could save a child or which charm might keep a cow healthy, then modern witchcraft is about choice. Today there's no single witch's path. Instead, there's a spectrum of practices, each with its own community, symbols, and goals. And the internet? It's done for witchcraft what the printing press did for the Bible. Put the tools and the teachings into anyone's hands. Some modern witches worked within the same traditions that their grandparents or great-grandparents used. Appalachian folk magic, Pennsylvania Dutch powwow, or Southern root work. These practitioners often blend Bible verses, protective talismans, and herbal medicine. The goal is still practical: healing, blessing, protection, and sometimes uncrossing or curse breaking. Many see themselves not as witches in the pop culture sense, but as keepers of a family or regional craft. The 20th century brought Wicca and other neo-pagan movements into public awareness. Wicca, created in the mid-1900s, and it combines ceremonial magic, nature veneration, and the reverence for the divine feminine and divine masculine. Ritual tools like atames, chalices, and pinnacles appear here, alongside seasonal celebrations known as sabbats. Appalachian witches sometimes blend with these neo-pagan frameworks within their own folk practices, creating hybrid traditions. Not everyone follows a set tradition, though. Many modern witches are eclectic, drawing from multiple sources and crafting a personal practice. This might mean blending tarot with kitchen magic, or candle spells with astrology. Solitary practitioners often work without a coven, designing rituals that suit their lifestyle and worldview. And there are a variety of specializations as well. So there's divination specialists. In the past, a cunning woman might read signs and tea leaves, or in the behavior of animals. Today's diviners use tarot and oracle cards, pendulums, runes, and astrology charts. Some focus entirely on this, offering readings online or in person. Modern dream witches carry on the plant-based traditions of the granny women. They grow or wildcraft herbs for teas, tinctures, oils, and ritual use. Many also keep a detailed grimoire gardens, recording plant properties, lore, and magical correspondences. Sustainability and ecological stewardship are often central to this path. Some witches focus less on spells for the outer world and more on working within. Shadow work is about confronting the hidden parts of yourself, trauma, fear, and suppressed desires, often through journaling, guided meditation, or ritual. This overlaps with the modern therapy techniques but uses magical symbolism as a framework. And there's also digital and pop culture witchcraft. Yes, witchcraft has gone digital. TikTok's Witch Talk has millions of videos sharing quick spells, tarot tips, and crystal lore. Pop culture witches, from practical magic to the craft, inspire aesthetic and identity as much as actual ritual. Online covens and Discord groups allow people on different continents to work the same spell at the same time. The biggest difference between the old and the new? In the past, witchcraft was something your neighbors accused you of. Today, it's something people often choose and claim proudly. But there's still a thread connecting Grace Sherwood to a 21-year-old making herbal salves in a Virginia apartment, a love for plants and the land, a willingness to work in the unseen, and an understanding that power, even in small doses, changes how others see you. In the end, witch stories are about power. Who holds it, who fears it, and who gets to tell the tale afterwards. Sometimes the witch is a neighbor with a healing hand. Sometimes she's a shadow on the road with the feet of a bird. And maybe the reason these stories endure is that every community, no matter the time or the place, has its witches. The only question is whether you're knocking on their door for help or watching them vanish into the trees. I want to thank you for tuning in to Arcane Station. If you have a story to share, corrections to what I'm sharing, because I could be wrong for sure, or just want to reach out, I'm happy to have that conversation. You can contact me via the forum on the website. My email address is mike@arcane-station.com, and I'm super happy and excited to talk to y'all on Instagram, Discord, or wherever you might find me. Have a good night.